Hey guys, I'm Lowlife and this is my first video ever. It's going to be a Marvel Rivals 2025 character wish list. For this video, I'm going to be trying to avoid any characters that have been leaked for Season 1 coming in January. Now with that out of the way, I have 6 characters that I have brought to you today. First of all being Kitty Pryde, aka Shadowcat. She's been a long-time addition to the X-Men mythos, and I think could be a really interesting, unique character to bring to a game like this. Now, there's only one way I can really see this going. I see Kitty Pryde as a assassin DPS, phasing in and out, taking off lanes, picking off supports, or weakened characters. Now I'd like to introduce a mock-up of what her kit could look like, and if you have something different than me, I would like to hear it down below. This is just my interpretation of what Kitty Pryde would be like in Marvel Rivals. I think her primary could be something called maybe a phase strike. It does medium damage, quick melee, it would go through shields, ignore armor, be on a short cooldown, basically just a quick punch or two, and that's it. Now for her first ability, I can see something called Mass Phase. You'd phase a nearby ally or two, make them immune to damage alongside yourself, and I would put on a 3-second cooldown. It'd be very close to what Cloak and Dagger does, but without the verticality aspect and without the size. For ability 2, maybe you could add something called like a Ghost Walk. It'd be a mobility-based ability. You could phase through walls, increase speed, become invulnerable, have vertical movement, and you would use it as an escape or engage tool. I think that these two abilities really keep to Kitty Pryde's history and make her a unique, utility-based character. For Kitty Pryde's ultimate, I've imagined something that I like to call a ghost grab. And when you use the ultimate, you would grab a single enemy, be able to phase through walls or floors, and you'd have a 3 or 4 second max duration where you'd be able to drag them anywhere you want. Their team can't save them, you're both invulnerable. They can't escape or damage you. If I had to compare it to something, I'd say it's similar to a Reaper TP from Overwatch, but you'd be taking a hostage, so you could be able to kidnap healers, isolate tanks, split the team up, set up team kills, environment kills maybe. I think that it would be a really terror-inducing ult, but not yet overpowered. I think to counter this ult, you could CC before the grab. I think it'd have a telegraphed startup, indicating when to prevent it, and I think its limited range makes it to where you're not taking an enemy and placing them wherever in the map that you want. Now, to give an idea of what I imagine Kitty Pryde being like, she's a high mobility character that can take advantage of surprising hit and run strategies, fast-paced constant mobility, and uses precise timing to exploit openings. Now to switch it over to a strategist, next up I actually have Silver Surfer. Personally, I've always loved Silver Surfer, especially in the old movies, and I know that his fans, there may not be a ton of them, but I know that they're hardcore, and I think he'd be a great addition to this game. So leading into his kit, personally I see his primary being something like a Cosmic Blast. It'd be a medium range, medium damage beam, or a projectile. It'd be a burst or have AoE potential. Constant pressure while positioning is what I think for this. Now for his first ability, I imagine it being something called like the Power Cosmic. I can see it buffing teammates, either with their damage, it would buff their health regen, or maybe even help with CD reduction for teammates in his line of sight. I can see this ability being similar to Orb of Harmony from Zenyatta, except I can see it buffing the damage or lowering the cooldown reduction for a teammate in LOS. Now for ability 2, I believe this would be a toggle for his silver board so that Silver Surfer is given the ability to fly. I think this would be a really good addition to the game because there's not yet a strategist that can fly. It adds an interesting loop where you can hover above the battlefield, reposition yourself, get quick picks, all while supporting your teammates and avoiding damage. For an ultimate, I'm thinking something like Cosmic Empowerment. You would basically overcharge your whole team, increase their damage output, faster CDs, maybe a speed boost, but the drawback to this ultimate would be that it drains Silver Surfer's health, and it would last about 8 seconds, I think. I know that ultimate is kind of vague. I have the core concepts down, a buffing and a slow kind of bleed to Silver Surfer's health. So if you have any suggestions or any of your own ideas, I'd love to hear them down below. But aside from that, next up, we have someone that I would be super excited to see in Marvel Rivals, and that would be Carnage. Obviously, I see him as a duelist. His role is kind of like an aggressive DPS, high mobility assassin. I'm thinking of him as an in-between of Venom and Spider-Man. Now for his primary, I can imagine something called maybe a symbiote slash. It'd be a close range, symbiotic melee. I think of his arm kind of becoming an angle, like a sharp angle or tendrils that go and slash at the opponent. I think that this would give Carnage high burst damage potential, and I think if you wanted to really get into it, you could maybe give Carnage a passive of bleeding, and there's a 1 in 5 chance that on a symbiotic slash that's successful, you leave the opponent with 3 seconds of bleeding damage stacked on top of their burst. Now, his second ability would be his movement. I would call it maybe a Predator Leap. Basically, Venom is 1 swing, Spider-Man is 3 swings, give Carnage 2 swings, he would have a faster animation, shorter range, and I believe the appearance of the swing would be more violent than Venom and Spider-Man. It would basically be for repositioning, but not too mobile to where he's everywhere at once. Now, for Carnage's third ability, I see it being something like Symbiote Surge. Essentially what that is his arm would morph into 3 different weapons that enhance his next 3 attacks. Those next 3 attacks are a piercing blade, an axe slam down, and a massive claw sweep. For his ultimate, I believe it'd be something called Maximum Carnage. Basically, Carnage would increase in size, and his damage would increase, and his health regen would increase. He'd be something like a mini tank for 6 to 7 seconds. I think obviously Carnage would have the same passive as Spider-Man and Venom, allowing him to run and wall climb. I see Carnage as more of a frontline DPS, a tank buster that really likes to work with his team and clear a room out, as compared to Spider-Man that really likes that one-on-one fight. The next character on my wish list is another Spider-Man villain. I love his aesthetics. He's a classic villain. His name is Mysterio. I can see his primary fire really tying into his outfit and coming from his gloves. They'd be hollow blasters that rapid fire moderate damage with a shimmering effect to make the source unclear. I'm imagining this primary sort of as a Tony Stark Iron Man propulsion blast, but more aesthetically fitting to Mysterio with green colors and a twist to make the source of the shot unclear. I'm seeing Mysterio have a secondary, sort of like the Punisher, to where he can throw a smoke grenade down that reduces the vision and disorientates enemies. For Mysterio's first ability, I think that it'd be pretty simple, just a shot that is a tracking projectile. Now for his second ability, to fit in with his theatrical nature, I can see it being called a phantom jump. Basically, Mysterio would teleport a short distance, leaving behind a copy that attracts and flickers briefly. This would be good at disorienting the enemy and also would give Mysterio good opportunity to get the jump on someone. Now for Mysterio's ultimate, I believe it would be called Mysterio's Mirage. Essentially, you would create a massive illusion of everyone or only the enemy team on the battlefield. The mirages would move and behave as real. The enemies would also have a brief debuff, like a stun, right when the ultimate is used, that lasts a short duration. Now, my second before last character on my wish list, but certainly my most wanted, would be Cyclops. I see him as a duelist. His primary would be his optic beam. It'd be sustained beam damage, and you would hold to charge it. It would basically pierce shields, and it would be a ranged fire. His first ability would be a wide beam, basically a horizontal sweep. It would push back enemies. It would be lighter damage, and a space maker. I can see this ability having something like a 12-second cooldown. For ability 2, I see it as a tactical visor, basically a precision shot and basically a single target burst, a mini sniper with no charge time and a cooldown of 15 seconds. For ability 3, I see a combat roll. It'd have an 8-second cooldown, it'd be a quick reposition, you can shoot during it, and animation cancel. It would basically just be tactical movement. His ultimate would be something like Get Off My Lawn. It would be a massive optic blast that destroys barriers, pushes back, and it'd be a room clearer. I imagine it as a ability 1 if it were super buffed up. I think if you include the leader of the X-Men, you have to make a team up with other X-Men allies. I would call this team up To Me, My X-Men, and they would get increased damage and increased speed. Overall, I see Cyclops as a backline damage character, a shield breaker, and a space control beam sniper. I think he would excel at protecting supports and keeping enemies back. Finally, we have our final character, and that would be Mystique. I can see Mystique's primary being something like a rapid melee chain that has a damage boost on backstabs. For Mystique's first ability, I can see it being called Shapeshifter. You'd get an 8-second cooldown on it, and essentially you'd copy an enemy hero and get their basic attack. It's a brief power steal, and it keeps Mystique's movement, and it would have a 10-second duration. Her second ability would be her movement. It'd basically be a tactical flip, an acrobatic leap, and you can aim what direction you're going, and you could cancel into a copy. So it'd be really good for repositioning and disrupting enemy backlines. Mystique's third ability would be called Fatal Deception. It would have a 12-second cooldown, and it would be a quick strike combo. You'd have bonus damage if you were disguised, and you could chain it into abilities. It's basically like a super assassin move. And finally, I haven't come up with a good name for her ultimate, but essentially what it would do is mark the enemy team. They would see their allies as enemies. It would cause team confusion, and it would have mind games and a 6-second duration. I mentioned it briefly earlier, but Mystique would have a passive called Opportunist. That passive would be a damage boost from behind the back attacks. Basically, I can see Mystique as a character that disrupts enemies, really thrives in opportunist picks, and would get melted in the front line. I find Mystique a interesting addition to the game because while some copycat abilities are in the game, like Loki, I think that this gives an opportunity to really expand upon the idea. Now, that's all I have for my wish list on Marvel Rivals Season 2 and beyond. I'd like to hear yours down below, and if you disagree or agree on any abilities I've given, any ultimates, if you can make anything better about what I've said so far, I'd love to hear it down below. And I just hope that if these characters are added in, they can be pretty similar to what we came up with together. Also, this is my first YouTube video. I plan on coming out with more. If there's anything you want to see from me, any video ideas, I'd love to hear them, and I hope to be getting to make them soon.